All right, let's see this quadratic formula in action. So first thing, we need to figure out what kind of equation we're working on. The quadratic formula only applies to quadratic equations. This is in fact a quadratic equation. I can see my y squared floating around. Second thing is it only applies if you have your quadratic equation written in standard form, which is that ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 type form. So I'm going to go ahead and first distribute. So I get y minus y squared equals 1 minus 6y squared. And then we need to set everything equal to 0. One side needs to be 0, so you can move whichever way you want. It doesn't really matter with the quadratic formula where positive and negatives are. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the left, but you could absolutely move right and it would still work. So I end up with 5y squareds, that single only y, and that single minus 1 equal to 0. So we're going to head for our formula, but our formula requires us to identify very carefully what our A, B, and C are. And note, it doesn't matter what order you write your terms in. A has to be the number attached to your x squared, or in this case, your y squared. B has to be the number attached to your y, and C has to be the constant. So even if I wrote this in a completely different order, if I wrote y minus 1 plus 5y squared, I would still choose according to what was hooked to y squared, y, and what was constant. So now when I go to the quadratic formula, it's going to tell me not what x equals, because this is an equation in y. It's going to tell me what y equals. And it says that y should equal the opposite of b, which is a negative 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 1 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 5, times c, which is negative 1. And that should all get divided by 2a. A is 5, so 2a is 10. So work through this very carefully. Messing up a sign or messing up a multiply will completely mess up your answer. It is a little tedious to work through the arithmetic, but that's all it is arithmetic. So we suck it up. Negative 1 plus or minus the square root of, okay, so 4 times 5 times negative 1, negative 4 times 5 times negative 1 is positive 20. So we end up with 1 plus 20, which is 21 all over 10. And that can't be reduced. There's no perfect squares that are factors of 21, so we're great there. Be aware that that is actually giving you 2 answers. If you wanted a decimal approximation, you'd go in your calculator and you'd plug in negative 1 plus root 21 all divided by 10, and then negative 1 minus root 21 divided by 10.